Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. This week on Yom HaShoah, Jews in Israel and around the world commemorate the murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazis and their collaborators during the Holocaust. In today's episode, we talk with two children of survivors about what happened to their family during the Holocaust and the lessons we can learn from their family history. I'm Evelyn Marcus, and in addition to being a psychologist, I am featured in the documentary about anti-Semitism, Never Again Is Now. I am a Dutch Jew and a daughter of Holocaust survivors. In 2006, I immigrated to the United States because of the rising anti-Semitism in Europe.
I am Phyllis Zimpler-Miller, the founder of the free nonfiction Holocaust theater project, thinedgeofthewedge.com, with firsthand testimonies of survivors and saviors. I grew up in Elgin, Illinois, a small town northwest of Chicago. It was not a Holocaust community. It was a community in which our parents and grandparents had fled the Tsar at the turn of the 20th century and other pogroms. And yet in September 1970, my U.S. Army officer husband and I were stationed in Munich, Germany, and this changed our lives as Jews forever.
We have two guests today. Jeroen Bos is originally from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and immigrated to Canada in 2000. He lives in Midhurst, Ontario, with his wife and two daughters. He works as the head of security for one of the largest investment companies in North America. Our second guest today is Rosa Ziegers. She's also originally from Amsterdam. Her mother was a Dutch Jewish Holocaust survivor. Rosa emigrated to the United States in 2006. She is a business consultant in Los Angeles, California. Jeroen and Rosa, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank you for having us.
So I get to ask the first question, and this is of Rosa. What does Yom HaShoah, Israel's Memorial Day of commemoration, mean to you?
Thank you for that question, Phyllis. Look, Yom HaShoah is about commemorating the 6 million. To be honest with you, the older I get, the more I commemorate every day. So in that sense, it isn't that special. Having said that, this is a day that more of the world is commemorating it. And I think that's very important. And it still feels like a special day for me.
And can you share with our listeners what happened to your family during the Holocaust?
Sure. This is about my mom. I'm from a mixed marriage. My mother was Jewish. My father was not. I always say my mother was triple Jewish. So there was no doubt in her mind that if she would have children, I'm an only child, by the way, they would be Jewish. So I've been sent to Jewish schools from since I was 3 till 18. My mom lived in the Netherlands, and she was 12 when the Germans marched into the Netherlands and occupied it for the 5 years thereafter. She lived in a rural town in the east of the country called Almelo. And you know, the situation got worse and worse for the Jews, like everywhere else. One day she came home from school in the middle of the afternoon, and she found the house empty. She lived there in that house with her mom and dad, her sister, and her grandparents from her mother's side. They were all gone. The house was demolished. And here she was, a 14-year-old girl. She didn't know what to do. And so she decided to put on all the lights because she was so scared. And she hid in the kitchen cabinet under the sink. The next day, the best friends of her parents, who were also Jewish, and they were quite important Jews in that community, they heard about the raid on my mom's parents' home. And so the man out of that family went to my mom's parents' home to check what was going on. He heard crying, looked and looked and looked, and found my mom hidden in the kitchen cabinet under the sink, took her out and took her in to his family with 5 kids, one of whom was my mom's best friend. So when they went into hiding, they gave my mom to the Dutch resistance, who took care of her for the coming 3 years. And in those 3 years, she also was brought into hiding. And from hiding place to hiding place, she saw 15 different hiding addresses. And then when the end of the war came, 1945, she came out only to find out that she was the sole survivor. She always told me that on both sides, her mom and her dad's side, there was a big family, and none of the family had come back. So, here she was, 17, needed to rebuild a life for herself, and that's what she did. So that's my mom's story.
And I just am curious, was it not a raid on the Jews in the whole village? It was just, had someone informed?
No. It was only very particularly on her parents' home, and it was because her dad. And by the way, I have very spotty stories about this, right? But what I know is her dad was a butcher, had a butcher shop. And by that time, there was a new regulation that Jews could no longer own businesses.
Oh.
And he was having this butcher shop together with a partner who was non-Jewish. He, of course, needed to provide for his family. And so illegally, he continued to do some business, but illegally and hidden. His partner, clearly an anti-Semite, then reported that to the Dutch police. And therefore, the house was raided. So that's the story I was told. And that's why, thank God, the friends of the family were still there. Their house was not raided. So it was very targeted to my mom's family.
I wondered if it was an informer. So thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
And Rosa, could you share with us where the family was murdered?
Yeah, Auschwitz and Sobibor. I mean, I don't know. What I do know is my mom's sister went to Auschwitz and my mom's dad went to Sobibor. I do not know where the rest of the family went, but I do know that most of the Dutch Jews went to either one of those places. So I assume most of them went to Auschwitz and Sobibor.
Yeah. Thank you. Jeroen, the Holocaust is also part of your family history. Did your father tell you a lot about it when you grew up?
Actually, no, not a lot. My father, first of all, was a man of few words and would not really share stories about his youth or the war. When I was a little boy growing up, I knew that we were Jewish on my father's side, and also that the family had not survived. But for me, it was more like an abstract idea. I did not really identify with these people. I mean, I was just a little boy. Then later, when I was older, like say 14, 15, I would ask my father more questions and more press on him to answer. But he really would seldom answer. If he did, it would be very like succinct and factual, never share any emotion. And if you got one answer, that was it. After that, he would either just stop the conversation or like use humor to deflect. And I think that was his way of dealing with these questions. But it was somewhat on. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to just clarify.
Yeah.
Was he born after World War II, or did he actually live through the Holocaust?
No, he was born in 1928. So he was 12 when the war started, and he was like 17 when it ended.
And he was never rounded up?
No, not right. No.
No, we'll get to that. So, okay. How did you come to learn about your family's Holocaust history?
Well, so I knew somewhat that they were killed in camps, but I did not really know their names or their history. And it wasn't really until about, I want to say, a year and a half ago that I started to really look for public records, because there's quite a lot of information available once I got a hold of some of the names of these people. and then I was able to read like the history and what happened to them. So so generally I knew some stuff from my parents, but like the more detailed information really was from online research.
I see. Could you please tell us what happened to your family in Holland during the Holocaust?
Yes. I think it's important to note that my grandfather, he was Jewish, and he married a non-Jewish Catholic girl at the time, which led him to be ostracized by his family and also like the Jewish community where he was part of. So that was terrible in itself, but at the same time, that is actually what later led to him survive the war. Like all Jews, he was subjected to all the laws that the Germans introduced. Like you mentioned earlier, like Jews could not be public servants, could not own a business anymore, public transportation. So the net was really closing around him. But as a Jew of what they call a mixed marriage Jew, he was put on what they would call a Sperr list. So a Sperr list is just a temporary exemption list. So he was temporarily exempted from deportation. But around 1942, he, with many other Jews, were forced to report to Amsterdam, and there they lived in the Jewish quarters. Not very favorable conditions. Often, like 2-3 families would occupy one house together. And then towards the end of the war, he was forced to work in a camp in the northern part of Holland, where they were working on fortification of the defense line for the Germans. It's not clear to me completely whether he like stayed there until the end of the war. I believe that I was told that he actually like was hiding the last couple months in the house and did not return. But that's how they sort of made it through the war. And then the war was over, and the world wanted to move on, and they were left with those sort of wounds, psychological wounds, to fester.
So
But
your grandfather had a temporary exemption from
yes,
deportation
yeah,
because he was married to a non-Jewish woman. Then he was put to work in a labor camp in the north of the country that worked for the German military defense. And one day when he came home, maybe for the weekend or so, he just didn't return to that camp, and they probably went in hiding together,
sure.
right?
Yes.
Uh, didn't you also tell me before that they were living in a Jewish ghetto during the Holocaust?
Yes, well, they were living in the Jewish quarter. So at one point, the German authorities assigned a part of Amsterdam where a lot of Jews were already residing, and that's where all Jews had to live. And you could go in and out, but it was a highly controlled area.
Yeah, I see.
And your father, as a teenager, wasn't taken for labor.
No, because he was too young, really. He was like 12 when it started. He did tell me some stories about, having to survive in that environment and looking for food, looking for stuff to steal, really, to trade. He was arrested when he was breaking into a house, and they were stealing. Him and a friend were stealing like the wood just to have firewood. So it was pretty rough, but it is a different story from what Rosa's family went through.
Rosa, could you share something about the experiences your mother had in hiding as a child, alone?
God, she told me a couple of stories, but my impression is that she did not tell me what really happened, that she kind of shielded me from that. My suspicion is, I mean, look, she was a girl of between 14 and 17. Sometimes she was alone with a man in a very small space for months in a row. Who knows what has happened? That part I didn't hear. I did hear stories like where she would have to lie in a space that was under the house that was like this low. So the only thing she could do was lie, and not make any noise, no sneeze, no cough, no nothing. I heard stories like how she was sent out in a cornfield and she was really small. So she would be lower than the corn. And she was told to lie down, and a regiment of German soldiers literally marched over her without seeing her or noticing her. There are stories like that of narrow escapes that, you know, when I hear them, my throat is getting together. I think it's been a terrible experience.
And what impact did your mother's Holocaust history have on you and your life?
How long have you got? Look, I think you can summarize it in probably two themes for me. It took me years of therapy to get over that. The first theme is, and certainly as an only child, you know, your role in life, literally from when I was born, was to make up, right? To repair the past and to provide a future. And what I've learned through therapy is that the way to do that is to constantly look, that's how you're programmed, at your mother for, you know, what does she want? How can I make her happy? Which, by the way, you'll never succeed, right? I couldn't make my mom happy anymore. As a result, you do not develop a sense of self, no sense of own identity, because you're so focused on what she wants that you're not focused on what you want. That's where the 10 years of therapy came in very handy.
Okay.
The other thing I would say is this sense of being alone. You know, that's the message I got from my mom, you know, for every single day of my life. You know, you have no family, and therefore you're on your own, which, by the way, has its good sides, because from a very early age, she told me to always be able to provide for yourself. But it's also something that, you know, it's something you have to live with, that my mom had to live with. She could never say goodbye. She could not. So even when I went on a school trip for a day, you know, she would be crying when I stepped into the bus. I mean, she just could not say goodbye because she had never said, I mean, I can go on for ages, but I think those two things, the no family and the, you know, your role in life is the other. It's not about you, it's about the other, are the two main things in terms of impact.
And then do you have something to share with our audience now?
Yeah, because in this, as I said, the sense of being alone is how I grew up. And 2 months ago, all of a sudden, I get this this message through a Facebook, which, by the way, nobody ever messaged me through Facebook, but I got a Facebook message, and I open it, and it reads, "Hello, Miss Ziegers. My name is Jeroen Gideon Bos." It looks like, when I look at internet websites, it looks like your grandfather is the brother of my grandfather. If you want to know more, here's my phone number and my email address. Please reach out. So I was in shock. I happened to be in the Netherlands at the time visiting a friend. And I was in total shock, because now, what is this? Is it a family member all of a sudden, right? And so that appeared to be Jeroen here in the show. And so I replied, and we set up a call, and sure enough, I learned through all the unbelievable research Jeroen has done what happened. What I forgot to tell you in the beginning is that what my mom did tell me is that she was raised very Orthodox Jewish on both sides, by the way. Both father and mother came from a very Orthodox family. And so hence the how do you call that? The expulsion of Jeroen's grandfather came from that Orthodox family, right? Which is probably why my mom wasn't even aware that this person existed. But when we started to talk, Jeroen and I, it turned out that not only did Jeroen know everything about, not everything, but a lot more than I did about this situation and about my family. It also turned out that he was born and lived for, I don't know how long, Jeroen, maybe 30 years, maybe 40 years, 10 minutes away from me in Amsterdam. And so, I mean, we grew up together without knowing it. So I'm incredibly excited to have found Jeroen back. We have spent many conversations already trying to learn from each other, really, about our families. So that's what happened.
So you lived for all those years with the notion, the belief that you no family at all because of the Holocaust. Now,
right.
Suddenly, a second grade cousin
That's right.
approached you and turned out to have lived 10 minutes away from you.
Exactly.
For 40, 50 years.
That's right.
Jeroen, how did you find Rosa?
Well, I started to do like online research into our family history, and I used like public records like marriage certificates and other civil or municipal records, really. But the real breakthrough was I was able to go about 3-4 generations back, and there was kind of where I was stuck. But the real breakthrough was when I found a website that had like listed everything out completely from the family all the way to around 1700. And that website turned out to be managed by a relative of mine. I did not know he existed either. And his name is Harry de Groot. So Harry really is the man who made all this possible. I just connected the dots a little later on. But he had everything documented from when people were born, their profession, when they got married, and also all their death records. And so through that, I used those names to look for more information about each individual sort of family member. And what happened was I found this one person, Joseph Bos. So that is my grandfather's oldest brother and Rosa's grandfather. And I was particularly interested sort of in his story because he was 52, 53 when this happened, and he had two daughters.
When the Holocaust started.
Yes, yeah, like when he died or when he was arrested and was killed. And he had two daughters, 20 and 14. And I'm the same age, and I have two daughters the same age. So I kind of sort of felt a connection with him. And I had done a lot of research. I knew that the youngest daughter had not been arrested and that she was in hiding at one point. But after that, we lost all trace. And then I just happened to come upon I think it was a note that Rosa made somewhere on a website. And she wrote something about that. So I was able to deduct, okay, this is like Joseph's granddaughter. And anyways, I reached out to her, and then it all kind of clicked. I'm just happy I was able, first of all, to provide her some information, again, that Harry really put together, not me, but I was able to share this information with her, which I hope gives us a little more closure, for lack of a better word. And just to know what happened is better than to have this guessing all the time.
Yeah, that's important.
I would think. I mean, Rosa can speak better to that than me, but I think that is important. Plus, I was able to connect her to all the family on my grandfather's side. So now she suddenly got about 40 or 50 cousins. So that's good. So there's
Amazing.
a lot of extra Christmas cards.
So, Rosa, what did you learn about your grandfather,
Unbelievable.
Joseph Bos, who you have never known,
No.
right? How, because he died in the Holocaust, what did you learn from Jeroen that you didn't know? And also
Yeah.
about your aunt that you have never known?
So yeah, that was amazing. Again, all I knew from my mother was she came home in an empty house, and 3 years later, on the Red Cross list, she found out that they were killed, right?
Yeah.
But what I learned from Jeroen is that my grandfather was, when he was arrested, he wasn't sent to the camps immediately. He was sent to Vught, which is a prison. And he must have been sent there because he was illegally doing some trade, right? And from Vught, he was then sent to Westerbork, which was the Dutch collection camp from where trains would depart to the killing camps. And I learned from Jeroen that he was in Vught for a couple of months and then sent on a train to Westerbork and immediately on to Sobibor and immediately killed. It's not nice information to know, but it is more than my mom ever knew, for instance.
About her father, yeah.
About her father. On my aunt, so my mother's sister, who was 5 years older than my mother, Jeroen told me that she lived in Westerbork for a couple of months. She already left when my grandfather came there, so the two of them have not met each other, which was a question I have had for my entire life. Were they together at least? I've now learned from Jeroen they were not. But he also told me that when she finally was put on the train to Auschwitz, Jeroen explained to me normally the train takes 3 days, but in her particular case, there were 4 days between the departure date from Westerbork and the arrival date in Auschwitz. And Jeroen explained to me that that was a particular set of trains. You even had a name for it, which I can't remember, where the train would stop at a certain village, where they selected people from the train to be put to work in the war industry. And therefore, those trains would take 1 day longer than when you were on the fast track, so to say.
Because they selected people there.
They selected people there. Clearly, my aunt didn't make the cut because she was still in the train. And then when she arrived, was also, I think, immediately killed.
In Auschwitz, right?
In Auschwitz, yeah.
20 years old. 20 years old.
20 years of age, yes.
Was she with your grandmother at that point?
Say that again, sorry?
Was she with her mother, your grandmother at that
No,
point?
thankfully, my mother passed away in...
Your mother? No,
my grandmother, sorry, passed away a death by cancer, not by the Germans, during the war, but not in a concentration camp.
So she had passed away already because of illness.
Correct.
She got to be buried.
Yes, there is a grave of her.
So yeah. So if I try to imagine that your grandfather was in this prison for criminals, alone. Your mother was taken by friends of the family and put into hiding.
Yep.
And his other daughter was sent to Westerbork and then to Auschwitz. They all three didn't know what was going on with the other two.
You have to
and they all went through it alone. I mean, just to imagine what went through your grandfather's head that day, or in those months.
Yeah.
Unimaginable. And same thing in your mother's mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeroen, does the Holocaust still have an impact on you?
Well, I think that I was indirectly impacted, mainly to the impact that it had on my dad, and subsequently how we were raised. I do believe that his experience through World War II negatively impacted his emotional development, for lack of a better term, and that resulted, I think, in his sort of inability to really express love and affection. for myself and for my brother and my mother. As for impact on myself beyond that, I think it's more, and I think that's for most Jewish people, it's just sort of a fear of not per se for myself, but for my children now. Like, okay, what's going to happen with them? I see that anti-Semitism is on the rise in Europe. I think that in North America, like Canada, US, I'm not sure if the general public is so aware of what's happening and if they really see this as something to come. To the point where, like I'm actually converting to Judaism, and to the point where I'm thinking, okay, am I like bringing my kids into danger? So that's somewhat overshadowing this. So for me, again, it's really like the impact on how my father was emotionally impacted by it, and a bit of fear for the future, to be quite honest.
Okay. And like an antenna that is super alert.
At the same time, if I may add something, the fact that Jeroen is coming back to the fold of Judaism after his grandfather was expelled by his family, and really turned his back towards Judaism as much as he could, I guess. Not completely, because the Germans made sure he couldn't go. But the fact that Jeroen is coming and his family are coming back, I find beautiful. And it kind of closes the circle for me.
Can I ask why? Are you comfortable telling us?
Yes. I mean, for a couple of years now, I've been on this sort of, I don't know, existential quest. That sounds a little, but you know what I mean. I was looking for, like, why are we here? What are we doing? What is the reason? And I realized, just me and Google and 2 overdue library books are not going to answer this question. And because of my background, I started to really read up more about Judaism, and I realized that my wife and I really sort of shared those values, and did a lot of those things already, somewhat without the religious aspect of it. So we were already in things like tzedakah and giving to other people. So it was really not such a big step. And I've been going to the synagogue now for, I want to say, a year. And I've started this conversion course now. It's about a year, really, because it's not really part of my culture, like my everyday culture. But I do think that I get a lot out of it. Also, it has been like sustaining our family and generations before. So it is nice to go back into that fold.
I would say that that's one of the effects of or impacts of your family history. It's what happened to my husband and I when we were stationed in Munich, Germany.
Yeah.
We decided to become more observant because it was the one thing that we couldn't bring back a single person, but it was the one thing we could do to say that their lives were important and we wanted to continue with their traditions.
Yeah.
The word isn't congratulate, but I want to say something positive about what you're doing, whatever the verb is.
Yes. I appreciate that. Yeah, I do think that also, like the other day, we, like last Shabbat, we did Mornis Kaddish, and it was, of course, all centered around Holocaust. And yeah, that is really impactful. And I have to say, the first time I stepped into the shul and the cantor started singing was very emotional. Like, I was actually sitting there just crying, listening, and taking everything in.
It's because you have a Jewish soul. It hits you, right?
Yes.
Right. So we're coming near the end of the program. We wanted to give you some last thoughts, but also we just wanted to say, for our listeners, do you think it's important that they commemorate Yom HaShoah every year, even whether they're Jewish or not Jewish? I just did a program at 4 a.m. LA time with middle grade students in Germany, an American military school, in which they're doing Yom HaShoah programming. So do you think
Let's translate it one more time. Yom HaShoah meaning the day of commemoration of the Holocaust, or Holocaust Remembrance Day. Is it important and relevant for today, you guys think?
Well, I believe that Holocaust Remembrance is very important, obviously to remember and honor the people who have been killed and so terribly mistreated, but also for future generations. The Holocaust was unique, I think, in its sort of industrial scale of killing people. But hatred against Jews has been around long before that and is still there and is still, I think, rising. But the Holocaust did not just take place in camps. The way I see it is those camps are really at the end of this conveyor belt, and they are not able to operate without a system where like governments or authorities can implement laws and regulations that are really aimed at dividing and dehumanizing people, and also cannot really be executed without like a bureaucracy and like a law enforcement that is sort of mindlessly doing their job. So rather than having to fight and liberate the next concentration camp, I think the Holocaust Remembrance is important because it tells us where we can start, and we can start fighting at our own local level and fight not just anti-Semitism, but basically hatred for every group for no real tangible reason. So I think it's part remembrance, but also part, okay, this is something you can learn from and that you can apply to today and to tomorrow.
Very well said. I said
And
that.
Rosa?
I just want to say I said that to the young people today, that this is a charge about the future. Very important. Thank you. Yeah, Rosa?
Yeah, I agree with Jeroen. Every word that he says. I have not much to add other than maybe, as the generation, the actual survivor generation is, getting less and less. I think the onus on us, the second generation, is becoming bigger and bigger. And I really do believe that we have a role to fulfill in today's society, to warn and to honor also the memory of those past, for all the reasons that Jeroen mentioned.
Yes, I think that's a really beautiful way to close, that it's a charge for the future, that we remember the past, but we take it as a commitment to the future, that we never let it again to any other group.
Exactly.
So I want to thank you both our guests, and thank you for the reveal. I think it was very clever not to reveal it until halfway through of your relationship as second cousins, found after how many, 60, 80 years. It's amazing.
Yep.
And I thank all our listeners. For any of you who have not yet seen Evelyn's documentary, Never Again Is Now, please do see it. You will learn a lot. It's very compelling, on Amazon and YouTube. You can learn more about my Holocaust play, all nonfiction, at thinedgeofthewedge.com. And as we finish every show, we say, without putting yourself in physical harm, please, whenever you can, speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.